Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of SecurityGuyTV.com at Black Hat 2021. My next guest is Mr. Kevin Dunn. He's the president of Pathlock.com. Mr. Kevin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having us, Chuck. Great to be here.
Yeah, I love the name. It conjures up all kinds of things. The number one being security. I feel safe with a name like Pathlock. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
unified access orchestration today. Now, I kind of get access orchestration, but unified caught my attention. Tell us basically what access orchestration is.
Yes. So, access orchestration is an emerging term. We're seeing it across the market, especially as people have transitioned to remote work and cloud migrations. Basically, what we're seeing is that the typical network-based perimeter is starting to erode, and as people are moving into these best-of-breed cloud applications, they're needing to basically use access as the new perimeter. So we see access orchestration as not just sort of typical legacy access controls and access governance, but extending that into other use cases, right? So, should this person have access to this specific data? What should we do with this person's access if they've logged in from a new and unusual location? What should we do with this person's access if they look at data that doesn't relate to their job function, right? For example, if they're a customer service representative in Europe, but they look at information about someone in the US, should we do something with their access, terminate their access, send alerts, orchestrate a response throughout the security operations center based on what they're doing? So, really, access orchestration we're seeing as sort of the next generation of access control, because really just granting people access to an application no longer seems to be enough to keep people secure. They need to take the next step and basically watch what people are doing with that access after the time it's granted. And that's what we see as access orchestration.
Now, I'm going to let you know a little secret. I have white hair, which means I've been around a little while. My grandfather actually helped install the computers for Disney back in the day. And of course, that was what we called
Wow.
hierarchy storage management, right? You had a big room with a
Hmm.
giant computer and your terminal was dumb. And guess what? Nobody could really access anything or take anything off that terminal. So we've come a long way. We're creating hierarchy storage management in the cloud. That's the cloud, so to
Right.
speak, the closet terminal.
Right.
So we have all these acronyms flying around. I'm a purchaser, I'm 60 years old, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, and you have to explain to me why I need this because I got 125 applications on my computer already and a budget. And walk me through this and explain why companies should care about unified access orchestration. Break it down for us.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. First off, we're seeing that there's definitely a convergence, right, of different business functions talking about this problem. It used to be just that, sort of an IT organization or maybe a CISO would own access control and IAM, and then it wouldn't really involve the business. Now that we're seeing these new cloud applications be adopted, we're seeing a big shift in that conversation across departments and organizations. So we're seeing that oftentimes it's a mix of both technical and business, and sometimes governance, risk and compliance, even legal teams that are coming together to talk about access orchestration. It can be folks, for example, from finance that are talking to groups in IT or security about how they can work together, design roles, design business processes and controls in these applications so that they can prevent things like fraud from happening, prevent things like ransomware attacks in their business critical system. So I think that it's sort of a cross-functional group of folks that are coming together to protect these applications, and it's really becoming something that everyone in the business needs to care about. I think this past year, seeing that businesses had major outages from ransomware attacks, you can see that it's not just, let's say, the head of security or the head of IT who should care about making sure that nefarious attackers can't get into their business critical systems. The CEOs are going to care too. When you're a CEO and you're subject to a ransomware attack, your stock price goes down. Your customers can become unhappy. Your brand reputation gets tarnished, right? So it's becoming a C-suite problem, and we see that access orchestration really is one of the critical components of keeping your infrastructure secure, because almost everything today is running in these cloud applications, like you mentioned. So if people aren't taking that seriously and protecting those applications, then they're basically leaving themselves open to an attack.
Well, now this is the challenge always, the vernacular, explaining this to somebody. It's not their main job to run it, but they have to be coordinated, thus the whole term of convergence, right? How do we
Right.
get this language across to people to understand that, the word security is not physical or logical security, it's all security for everybody. How do we speak this language to get the C-suite and the people under the C-suite to understand we got to work together like in an orchestra, right? To get this
Right.
thing off the ground, because I think that's the challenge. The technology's here, we have solutions, but really we have to drive the will. How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily we have some help there, which I think are these general compliance mandates that are getting pushed on companies. The first one that really pushed people towards needing to converge finance and security was SOX compliance, right? And now we've been pushed through to other types of compliance based on industry and types of data that customers are handling. So we've seen HIPAA, we've seen GDPR, now CCPA, and a number of other privacy frameworks. So luckily, there's sort of some external forces that are pushing companies towards considering, hey, how are we actually going to protect the data we're handling? How are we going to protect the applications that are handling that data? But I think it's going one step beyond that. I think now CEOs and even members of the board are familiar with these compliance mandates and know that they need to do something. Usually, a chief audit executive will or chief compliance officer will report directly to the board. So it is something that's a board level initiative and that's taken seriously from the top down. But I think too many companies are sort of looking at it as a check the box type of initiative that, hey, let me just comply with this legislation. And to do that, I just come in at the end of the year and go through all of my users, their access, what activity they've performed, what data they might have looked at, and report out on that to the auditors and to the compliance bodies. But I think that that's not enough, right? I mean, that's a rear view looking lens. You're just seeing what happened over the course of the last 12 months. If data has been exfiltrated, if financial records have been manipulated, it's too late. There's nothing you can do about that, right? So I think it's educating the business owners on that side of the problem, right? That just checking the box and performing the basic compliance framework initiatives is not enough. You need to be moving towards basically a continuous approach to monitoring these security controls and monitoring compliance, because the compliance is really there at the end of the day to help these companies, right? It's a best practice. So it shouldn't be viewed as an exercise that just needs to be done to get out of trouble, right? It's there to help you prevent something really bad from happening.
So I oftentimes like to speak about these things in terms of physical security as well, because we have a lot of people in physical security that are trying to learn logical security, cybersecurity. They need to learn it, right? They need to get on board because everything is the Internet of Things. And you said something interesting to me when you discussed the perimeter is now access, right? That's further out. So the perimeter used to be the front door of the studio, and then we moved it to the gate, and then we moved it to the sidewalk, and then we started looking at intelligence as the perimeter. We needed to find out who was stalking our stars, and if we could find the guy way out there and stop him before we got to the studio, we were in good shape. Talk to us about some of the emerging trends in this space and explain it to people so they understand, why the perimeter is moving out, why we have to look at this as access control. And by the way, between you and me, it's always been access, hasn't it? Really, way back in the day.
Right.
It really has
Yep.
been, but we've tried to make it easy for people to use everything, and we've kind of overlooked that. So I'm glad it's going this way. Let's talk about some emerging trends.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think we've drawn a lot of parallels from physical access control in what we're doing in access orchestration, right? So if you view kind of the evolution over time, right? We could think about security and sort of logical security as starting out as a bunch of fiefdoms, big castles with moats around them, and all of the valuable resources. The farm animals, the gold, the weapons were all stored inside of this castle with a moat around it, right? So attackers would have a really tough time getting in, but once they get in, they would be able to get all of the valuable things that are being stored inside of that castle there. So there's kind of pros and cons to it, right? Big effort to get in, but once you get in, you can get a lot of stuff very quickly without a lot of kind of segmentation and defense around the things that are being stored in that castle. Then the evolution has been, companies are sort of breaking up that castle, and they're basically moving out all of the people from that fiefdom into little houses, right? That don't have a moat around them, and those are these cloud applications. So now you're thinking about it. If you think about it from the context of a house or a smaller building, right? Okay, what type of controls do I need? So I think people first primarily looked at access control, which is sort of like making sure that you've got the key to the front door, right? And that only people who should access that building have the key to get in the front door. I think that the next level that people are seeing now, and that's sort of the evolution to zero trust, is that okay, it's inevitable. We don't have a moat. This isn't a castle. It's a house, with a basic key lock. People are going to be able to figure out how to pick the lock, how to kick the door down, how to break in. So zero trust is basically, let's assume that's going to happen. What controls do we need next? And that's where I think you see the focus on monitoring, right? Monitoring is basically coming in and saying that, look, we know that people will get in eventually, so let's put a security camera inside of the house, meaning we're going to monitor everything that's happening inside of these applications. So if anything unusual happens, we can send an alert, instead of sending it to the police department or to the security guards, we're going to send it to the security operations center, right? And they're going to get that alert and say, okay, let's take control now. Let's go send some support to the house, or let's lock all the doors to the house and keep the attacker inside at bay until we can figure out what they're doing. Let's automatically lock the safe, things like that. So I think there's a lot of parallels you can draw, and we're just really in the early innings, I think, of the logical security market, right? I mean, the physical security market, as you mentioned, is very mature. So these things like motion detectors and security cameras have been around for a long time. In the logical security market, we're not really there yet, and I think access orchestration is still really in the early innings of developing a lot of those capabilities and techniques.
Excellent. Now, here's the big question: who is responsible for unified access orchestration? Now, responsibility may not be the same thing as who's in charge of it, who's managing it. I can say I'm in charge, but that doesn't mean I'm responsible. This is a kind of a very focused question. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I think if you look at just access orchestration, which is just the convergence of these themes around access control, data security, as well as application security, usually that falls on the application owner. If somebody owns, let's say, SAP or Oracle or Salesforce, type of initiative is going to fall on them. The unified access orchestration bit is basically saying that we're doing that across applications, right? So in a typical even finance organization, I think that you're going to see that there's 5 to 10 business critical apps. So it might be something like a SAP or an Oracle for general ledger. There could be something like a Reba for procurement, something that handles other functions like Blackline for financial close. So you've got to basically perform access orchestration across all these applications, because the business process routes through all of these different applications, and you have to control who has access to each application, what they're going to be doing at each step of the way. So when you talk about unified access orchestration, you're kind of elevating that up to the business process level. And I think that's where it's a unique and interesting space. I think, now we're not just talking to technical buyers. We're basically talking to who's the person who's on the line for that business process running smoothly. So in a finance organization, a lot of times we're talking to the CFO. If we're talking about human capital management systems, we might be talking to the head of HR. If we're talking about processes around customer data, right, or patient data, we might be talking to a head of sales, a chief customer officer, a chief data privacy officer. So there's a lot of different personas that get involved. I think what it really boils down to is, what is the data process that we're trying to protect with unified access orchestration, and who's ultimately responsible for that. But it definitely elevates it to more than just a technical problem. It's really more of a business continuity problem.
Kevin, I like the way you're thinking. I like the way you explained that. It's easy to understand. And I hope people are focusing on this on both sides because unified means, right, physical and logical people and all the different places inside the space. Now, you have some slides to show us to demonstrate some of this. Let's take a look at one right here and explain to us what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we'll be looking at our home page, our home dashboard. So this is really where you can see the unification of everything across applications. You'll see here we're pulling in information from multiple different applications involved in a business process. Here we're talking mostly about SOX compliance, so financially related business processes, but you could also filter this dashboard on controls from other business process areas like GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA. All depends on you and what you care about. So there's different views for the different owners of different business processes. One of the really unique things that we provide is actually a real-time risk score, and that's something proprietary to us. It's involved a lot of AI and machine learning to build the model that generates this risk score. But you'll see that when you log in and you get that initial view filtered by the applications you care about and the compliance frameworks that are important to you, you get a risk score or rating, basically showing you how are you doing relative to how you've done in the past. Can also be relative to where you want to go in the future. So you can get a view of how am I doing to basically keep my applications and my ecosystem secure, and stay up to speed on my compliance mandates and what is important to me. So it's a very unique view that gives you kind of that holistic level view of where your risk stands, and then also gives you these areas that you can drill down into. So we're highlighting users or potential risks that you might want to check out, that are bubbling up to the surface and need some sort of remediation. Awesome. And so here we're seeing our master data catalog that we create. So once we connect into your applications, we not only control the access that users have to applications, but we also understand where sensitive data lives. This is very important to deliver on our vision of access orchestration. We need to know what sensitive data lives in the application and combine, not only what access people have to the application at large, but specifically what data assets they're interacting with so that we can connect the dots. We can build a bridge basically using techniques like data masking, like monitoring access to data, data classification and discovery to essentially create a very fine-grained level of access control and monitoring that not only shows us what roles people have in particular applications, but what they're doing with those roles so that we can really have a very comprehensive view of risk and also compliance, specifically for compliance frameworks that relate to customer or patient data. Knowing the exact data types and data records that were interacted with is critical. So this helps to build the bridge between traditional data classification tools and also access control tools to do it all in one integrated platform. And then we can cut there and go to the last slide. And then finally here we'll show the security dashboard. Our security dashboard essentially gives you a 50,000-foot view of all the activity that's happening within your critical business applications. So here we're showing you a global depiction basically of where all users are logging into the applications you care about from, and where we're seeing suspicious activity happen. So here you can sort of get a sense of not only who all is logged in and doing something across the applications you care about, but where are there potential sessions that look suspicious. This way you can drill down into those sessions and you can see what those users are doing. And we surface those alerts not only in our tool, but also into other security tools, SIM tools like Logarithm, Splunk, you name it. We can integrate into those tools and provide alerts to the SOC team. I think this is really important as we see the transition from the network-based perimeter to applications being the new perimeter. Basically, these security teams now need to focus not on really alerts that are coming due to in unusual activity at a network level, but they want to see unusual activity at an application level. And this is where we're sort of bubbling up that information and also sending it to these security teams to enrich the typical data that they're already seeing from sort of the network level activity.
I've been speaking with Kevin Dunn. He's the president of Pathlock, love the name, pathlock.com, and speaking about unified access orchestration. Mr. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on Security Guy TV at Black Hat 2021, and good luck at the show, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chuck. Appreciate you having us.